Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down, as always, with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. I've got a fun show planned for you today, doing the last mock draft of the off season before we get to the real draft this next week, and lots of prospects to talk about. We're kind of dueling mock draft here. So Keith brought in his, I've brought in mine. There's no rules here. We just wanted to make up the best draft that we could, and leave it for everyone else to judge. Welcome in, Keith.
Yeah, these shows are always fun. I love them. And I know that it's hard to make these things match what's going to happen in reality because we're using a simulator and all of that. But it's fun. It's, you and I both go through and do so much research into guys and players, and then to put it all to all that work together and to try and run the Seahawks draft board, even if it is a simulation, it's still fun.
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to talk about something I was thinking about when I was trying to put this together is there's a possibility based on, who they select, where they select them, and so forth, that you could see a couple players attempted to be traded from the Seattle roster, starting with Sam Howell. They talked about that this week, that Jeremy Fowler reported that Sam Howell is on the trading block during the draft. Should another team want him, I would imagine it's either going to be kind of a pick swap, I think would be ideal, something to get Seattle in that void between 92 and 137, I think would be cool. I don't know that they're going to get straight out a fourth round pick for him. I think fifth or sixth is more likely. We'll see what happens there. Noah Fant could get picked if they decide to draft one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends in this draft. He could potentially get moved. Reek Woolen, if Will Howard's Will Campbell's there at their pick at 18, or they move around to get him. Reek could be a player that potentially could be moved, although I really like the room with him in there, in addition to Campbell. And then I was thinking maybe Oluwatimi potentially could be a player that if you drafted Zabel, for example, you've got your starter. They really like Sundell as well. No reason to have 3 guys on the roster per se if you could get something for him as opposed to cutting him, during camp or whatever.
ESPN had listed Charbonnet as one of the guys that could be traded.
Interesting, really.
If the Seahawks get a running back here, I think that would be a mistake. I'd rather see them keep him and trade Walker just because of contract. Walker's in the final year. Charbonnet's got another year left. And so just for the stability factor, if they do that, if they get a running back and then decide to trade one of them, I think Walker, it would be the preferred trade candidate. Probably might be more valuable to another team anyways because of his breakaway speed. But overall, yeah, I mean, no huge names there. Maybe Tariq Woolen would be the biggest name, the biggest surprise, the actual starter. I guess Noah Fant too, but nobody really knows much about tight ends off their own team. And so, yeah, I mean, it really comes down to what are you going to get back? And because if you went and you got a young player, you went and you got a guy, let's say Tyler Warren falls and is available to them. Now you've got your elite tight end, and Fant just kind of becomes a luxury, especially since you've already got Barner on the roster as a young guy. So you'd be able to have 2, trade Fant, move on, and hopefully get something in return besides just the salary cap relief.
Yeah, interesting. I've got this little thing going on in the back of my head, this light thing. So I was trying to get rid of that. It came back, so I'll have to Just bear with me, or I'll try again here in a little bit. Okay, so let's start. I stayed with my native pick at 18
Hmm,
on my
I did
first
not.
pick. Okay, so why don't you start it off? Did you drop
So
back or did you move up?
I dropped back.
Okay,
Um, I traded away 18 to Green Bay, got 23.87 and 159. That's a 1, a 3, and a 5, which matches up pretty much perfectly on the draft chart. And it's
okay.
it's one of those things that the more of these drafts that I do, the more that trade just becomes appealing. It gets me more picks where I want them, where I need them, and gives me the flexibility to move around at other points in the draft.
So I stayed. I did create another draft I really liked, where I did move up, because Will Campbell ended up falling out of the top 10. And so I went up to 12 and actually was able to get him by giving away 18, 82, and 175.
Wow,
And
that's a
uh,
that's a
and it
big
was
move
right in the
for
middle of the value trade,
yeah.
that the simulator put together. So and I enjoyed that pick. I didn't end up using that draft, but I seriously considered it because I really like the player and I like that potential move. And I kind of want to just mention it because I think it is a possibility that Seattle moves up in this draft because they do have the draft capital to do it. Now, whether it's, from 18 to 12 or it's from 50 to 40 or whatever, I think
Mhm.
it's something to look for in this draft to go get a player that they really want. And considering the lack of blue chip availability at 18, they may decide they want to leave a draft with one of those guys and solve a problem at the same time. Okay, so I will start with my trade. I
You
Let's
stuck and picked, right?
see. Yeah, I stuck and pick. Yeah, so there's no trade here. So a player that I identified that I would definitely stick and pick for ended up dropping. And there's a reason I think that he may drop in this draft. And I selected edge rusher from Georgia, Jalen Walker,
Mm.
which normally, in many mocks that I've done, he is just not there at all. And this last week, I've noticed every 3 or 4 mocks I do, his name is still hovering around 18. And so I've really kind of dug into him a little bit more because, when he's not available, you don't spend a lot of time looking at him. And I don't know if he'd be a guy that they would move up for, but if he's there at 18, I think it's a really good value for him. The reason I think that he is dropping just a little bit right now before the draft is that he's really viewed as a tweener, a guy that plays off the ball linebacker, probably at the will spot, where um, Tyrese Knight is currently playing. I think he would be an upgrade, a little bit of an upgrade there off the ball, but what his real skill set and value that he presents is an edge rusher. And he's not used as an edge rusher full time at Georgia, more of an off the ball linebacker that schemed to rush off the edge now and again. And when he did that, he was very good at it. And so you get kind of a hybrid player for Mike McDonald to mold. That's why I would be comfortable with the pick. Other teams, not so much. Other teams kind of view him as like, well, what is he going to do? What is he going to be for us? And I think Seattle uniquely is kind of positioned to be able to use his skill set really well. They move him around anyway. Mike McDonald's the whisperer there at the linebacker spot, and they take full advantage of the opportunity cost to pick him at this spot. Linebacker is not the upside value here. It's rushing off the edge, and so Jalen Walker at 18.
Yeah, I like that pick. He reminds me a lot of Bruce Irvin, um, who was an off the ball linebacker on against the run and a pass rusher on passing downs. And there's a lot of value in that because he's a really good pass rusher who does other things really well too. And I think that,
Drops back into coverage, all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and so in a 3-4 where you've got three guys already up there, and you're bringing one of the two outside linebackers on every pass play, you need, unless you're going to bring one guy the same all the time, which kind of reduces the value of the 3-4. You need your outside linebackers to do more than just pass rush, and he's one of the guys in this class who's ready made to be and be able to do that. And so I think he'd be a cool fit. I mean, he would be going into a room that already has 4 guys
Yeah,
trying to fight for
that was a
playing
little
time.
hesitation, and that's kind of why I liked my other draft. This was the one pick, and of course, it was the first pick that
Hmm.
I was just not sure about, and liked my other scenario better, where I traded up and got a real player of value that they really needed. And this one, he's gonna. It's one of those things where you put the tool in the toolbox and you let Mike McDonald figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that's the deal with this.
No, I'm cool with that. I think that's actually a good pick, a great fit, scheme fit for what Seattle has and needs and all of that. So I'm not going to complain about it. I think that would be a great like addition to Seattle's roster. It does make him better.
Yeah. Yes. But it's not going to be completely full time. And I don't know that the impact is going to win you games. Like it's just going to incrementally make you better. And we've talked about that before. It's like, what do you do at this pick? 18, you're likely not to get a guy that's going to have serious impact on your roster, unless maybe it's a starting left guard or whatever.
Mhm.
And so you just kind of have to weigh all that out. And I think that's why he falls a little bit, because it's not every team's gonna be able to use him in an effective way. So what did you do?
So after moving down to 23, um, I picked best player available. And if you go back to our last show where we talked draft strategy and all of that, I said, you know, Seahawks fans need to be prepared for the Seahawks not to go offensive line early in the draft because it's not a John Snyder kind of thing. And you can get interior lineman starters later. But when um, when Kelvin Banks dropped and was sitting there at 23, even though Nick Inamore, who is kind of my target, was also
uh,
there, um, I was like, I can't not do it. He is on some big boards considered the best offensive lineman in the draft, and others he's
mm-hmm,
considered, as low as the third. He can play tackle well. He can play guard. He can dominate with in a zone scheme because he's got all the agility and everything to move. He could play in a power scheme because he's just got that well cut center of gravity and strong base. He's just a very good player. I bring him in. He's my left guard or right guard or whatever in year one.
mm-hmm,
And then we figured out going forward because he's also my
mm-hmm.
swing tackle in year one and probably my starter at left tackle in year two and allows the Seahawks to move on from Charles Cross and not have to drop down the serious dough that it's going to take to pay him. But he makes this team instantly better in 2025.
I like the idea of moving him to left guard and keeping him there, because I think he's a better left guard prospect in the NFL than he is a left tackle or right tackle. I think he's a Pro Bowl level left guard, and he's a league average tackle. And so I would move him to left guard and leave him and let him be really good at what he does really well, and not have to worry about him on the edge so much. And that's just me, but I love that pick. I'm kind of coming back around to him. He's one of those players you really consider. A couple months ago, I think we did a couple mocks where he's kind of sitting there and we take him. And then we kind of moved off him a little bit. Haven't talked about him for a while. And now, coming back to warming up, I know that Brock Heward really pined for him on the ESPN radio a few days ago about a player that, if he's there at 18, you kind of run to the podium and you make the pick and you don't sweat it. You let the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach figure it all out, and he likely ends up at your left guard spot. And and you have Cross, you have Banks, you have Lucas, and the rest kind of figures itself out. And I think that's a really good offensive line going forward for you. I would feel so good about that, just to solve that at that level of the draft. I would take him at 18. I think he's going to end up going earlier, in all likelihood.
Yeah, if you
But
look
we'll
at
see.
some of like I said, some of the boards out there, NFL Draft Buzz has him at this as the sixth overall player um, on their draft board. Um, Mock Draft Database has him as the 13th, and that's the consensus board with that takes in stuff from everything. For him to be there at 23, I thought was crazy. I didn't expect him to be. I didn't when he was there at 18, I could have picked him, but
Hmm.
I was kind of committed to moving down if I could, because I wanted to move back up after that and get two players um, in that 23 to 40 range, and then have another one in the 50 range rather than 50 and 52. I wanted to move up and get a guy in that kind of spot in between Seattle's picks, because there's a lot of value and a lot of guys I really like that go in that range. And so
Me too.
um,
Me
I,
too.
I just kind of picked that as a strategy and rolled with it.
So I at 50, 52, I moved up. I
Yeah,
moved
so
from
did I.
50 to 40.
I moved from 52 to 39.
Okay, so go ahead. Well, the next pick would be 50. Maybe I should do this one. So I used the
Go for it.
50th pick instead of the 52.
Mm-hmm.
I traded with the New Orleans Saints pick for pick 40. They received back pick 50 and third round pick 92. I also picked up their 112th overall. So I got a little extra value there, kickback,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was really good value at that spot. And Gray Zabel was there. And so I went and got Gray Zabel, North Dakota State, at pick number 40. So edge rusher in the first round, we've talked about that. Don't look for offensive line necessarily, but I got the guy that I think that really fits the scheme. Well, you worry about this prospect because it's so hyped, so projected to Seattle. Even at 18, you're considering it because I think the value is better a little later, just because he's an offensive center. There is some little concerns here and there about him, but at 40, that's where the value is for him. I think maybe even slightly earlier, like 35, it starts to get really interesting where you're like, should I go now? Should I go now? You got to look at what other teams are going to do at that point.
How would you feel
And
about getting him at 39 instead of 40? Because that's what I did. That was my
nice.
trade, was to move up and get him.
Oh,
And to
nice.
get to get to 39 from 52, I also had to give up 87, which is a third round pick, but I got back 148 as well. So I moved
Interesting.
uh I gave up 52 and 87, which felt like a lot to give up, but getting, 39, the player I really wanted, and a fifth round pick made it worthwhile. So overall, I liked that trade. But yeah, it was for Gray Zabel. He's your center for the next decade, and
It makes too much sense. That's why it's so hard, because you feel like you're going into a trap. It's like, well, they're not going to pick him. It makes too much sense.
it
It's one of
makes
those
way too
things
much sense. Yeah.
that he's such a good scheme fit. He's such a good player. He's got all the things. They excelled at the Senior Bowl. They love those type of players. They gravitate. They
Hmm.
select those players over and over in drafts. It just makes a lot of sense that they select him. Which tells me that they're probably not the only team on the in the draft that is trying to figure out a way to acquire him. And so I pin the chances of this actually happening fairly low. But yet, if they really want him, I think that they're probably going to consider him at 18, or
Hmm.
a small drop back. And you did the pick at 23 or 24. I think that's the area where it starts to make
Yeah.
sense that you look at him. But the way that we structured this draft, now you've got Banks, now you've got Zabel. I think Seahawks fans are going to fall in love with you, Keith, because you've
Yes.
just handled
I've
the business that they want you to handle.
and I just did exactly what I warned Seahawks fans to
Prepare. It
not
wouldn't happen.
expect. But it just, I mean, Zabel was my target. I moved down specifically from 18 to help me have the ammunition to move up to get Zabel because I knew he was going to be available in the, 35 range. Um, and it just like 39 was when I hit pause and because it flies by pretty quick. Um, so I hit pause and it happened to be at 39 and he happened to still be there. So I went ahead and made the trade and do it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Same
and
thought process.
um, and then yeah, so you think okay, so I got guard and center fixing two of the three weak points on the offensive line. And with Banks, if somebody gets hurt or whatever, you're also possibly upgrading what you're going to have on the field at tackle instead. Because if Cross gets hurt and can't go week one, well, you've got another guy that you trust. So um, I do think that his flexibility to play four positions at a starter level is going to be worthwhile.
I
Um,
think
and then
so.
with and then with Zabel, you get your center for the next decade. And honestly,
What you've
line
done,
feels I
Keith,
feel really good about the offensive line after that.
yeah, what you've done is you've enabled the offensive line coach and offensive coordinator to put the best five offensive linemen on the field. Let them figure it out. You've
Hmm.
given them the tools and the players. Let them figure it out. If that means somebody that started last year has their feelings hurt and doesn't get on the field, then so be it. I also think this gives Christian Haynes actually a better opportunity at right guard to be the starter because now he's really surrounded with some really quality players, and I think
Hmm.
upgrading center over Oluwatimi helps him.
Yeah.
And so we'll see.
My only concern with that would be that you'd go in to the season with three guys and as the interior
Mm-hmm.
offensive line with combined zero starts
Mm-hmm.
at the NFL level.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? Sometimes you just need to start that way, and you hope that they grow into a really nice cohesive unit after week 8. And you just kind of you do
Yep.
what you got to do
Take your lumps
you just
early.
rip the band-aid off and you just go for it. And in this case, at least you've got a couple players drafted earlier that really projected as starters anyway. I don't think that there's going to be that heavy duty struggle if you're going to draft a third or fourth round guy and throw him in there.
Yeah.
These guys are, these guys are great players, really. All
Yeah.
right. And I stayed at, then I had 52, stayed
I
there.
had 50. Um,
Okay. So go ahead.
so at 50, I finally went defense. I know that watching the Seahawks take offensive players with two picks is probably, driving Mike McDonald crazy. I finally went defense, but I went Benjamin Morrison, cornerback out of Notre Dame. A
Interesting.
guy that I think I may like more than other people do. Um, I think he's an instant starter for Seattle over a guy like Tariq Woolen, who's been good and not really. Um, I mean, he's up and down. He doesn't tackle real well, and that kind of stuff. But there's still a lot of talent there. But we're looking at a guy who's um, you know he's got the length, he's got the speed at 4.39. He's young at only 21, um, and just really sticky in coverage, can play inside or outside. Um, and uh, ultimately, this guy is a potential, Pro Bowler, like fairly early in his career. But what makes him great is that he is a man coverage guy. Like he is not a guy that requires sitting back in zone in order to be effective. He can line up, match up against just about anyone and cover
Hmm.
them in man coverage. And the Seahawks run a lot of man coverage under McDonald. And so it's a good fit for him. Um, and so
Yeah.
um yeah, I
Yeah.
just
You want to,
him being there just it made perfect sense.
at this spot in the draft, you're drafting for starting potential. And, a guy that can play across the formation and line up against a whole bunch of different type of guys and move around exactly what they want their corners to do. Just a reminder, this is a player that you mocked in your very first mock draft to Seattle. In fact, I think you dropped back in the first round and you selected him at the back end of the first round. So this is
like
a really,
28. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So this is a really good value for you. I like him as a prospect. At that spot, it's like a perfect spot. Get your corner. I think it's an underrated need for Seattle based on contracts and who we have and so on and so forth. At 52, I selected Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State. Just a guy that I've really had my eye on for a while. I've mocked him to Seattle in the past. 6'3", 334-pound anchor, but also ran a 4.68 40. He's 22 years old. His rub is he's a little shorter, not as long as you want him to be. Still 6'3", but also 32-inch arms. But he's got a lot of experience, a lot of quality reps against elite level competition. He's a guy that's going to, you plug in right away to be your run stuffing defensive tackle or defensive nose tackle. And he can give you some plus stuff on all the rest, and earn his way to more reps as he develops the pass rush and gets stronger, all that kind of stuff. So there's your nose tackle. And
Love that pick.
I'd hate to leave this draft without one because it's so loaded. Like there's probably 12 to 14 draftable interior defensive tackles in this class. Now, some of them aren't true noses, but there's about 6 or 7 true nose tackles in this draft that I'd be happy to come away with. Just
and
from
last
a standpoint of
last year there was one, and it was an early round 2 pick if you wanted him, and then there was nothing for a while. And there was a couple of back into the draft kind of guys that you hoped you could draft and develop, and that there just weren't nose tackles. This year you've got like 6.
Yeah,
Go
you had
get a nose tackle.
Trevondre Sweat last year, and that was about it.
Yeah.
So that
I
was
like that pick.
Yeah, I do too. And this is kind of the poor man's Kenneth Grant. So if you're passing over Kenneth Grant in the first round, this is a guy that has a similar skill set, similar size, just a behemoth of a human to come in and anchor your defense.
Yeah.
Okay. So I stayed at 82.
And I also stayed at 82.
Go ahead.
So I went best player available here. I took this one, and I knew that people were going to probably like hate this pick because it's not a position of need, and it's a player that might not see the field that much unless there's an injury. But it's best player available, and I just felt like the difference between this player and the next best talent was high enough. I just had to do it, and I took Demetrius Knight, the linebacker out of South Carolina. And he's an interior linebacker, would back up both Knight and Jones in the center. Is a downhill, get to the line of scrimmage and make the tackle, at the line of scrimmage kind of guy. Very sure tackler, hits hard, and really athletic. It just is a downhill kind of old school, middle linebacker, and exactly, the type of player that McDonald would love. And I just think that there's no depth behind the 2 starters. Middle linebacker is a position where I think they need a guy in this draft. I wasn't planning on getting one this early, and a guy with who could probably come in and start if there was a spot for him.
Yes.
But he was just too good to pass up at this point.
Yeah, no, really broad shoulders, good length, good wingspan. Only got, almost 33-inch arms, but the wingspan is almost 81 inches. Like you said, downhill guy, plays, I think he came into the combine at 238, but he plays during the season at 245. big
Mm-hmm.
guy, traditional middle linebacker. If he was in a 4-3, he'd be in the middle. If in a 3-4, he's going to be Ernest Jones's guy for the most part, back up, but also he's so diverse. He can play inside and out, team captain. So good quality human,
Mm-hmm.
um, to come in and kind of add to your defense and make you better. You got to take a look at the roster. What do we have behind Knight and Ernest Jones? Not much. I mean, there's a couple guys there, right? But they were practice level, squad level guys that came in, didn't really earn minutes, didn't push anybody off, especially given the early stages of before Ernest Jones arrived last year. They couldn't earn playing time over the guys we shipped out, and it was dismal, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what you're kind of trying to replace. You did that. You did it at the in the third round, and I like the pick. I mean, that's where you're starting to look for depth anyway, and rotation pieces, and you kind of put them into sub packages and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and
There's a couple
you
positions that I
figure it
still
out.
think I still think the Seahawks need an impact guy. Um, and like, before they start looking on depth and backups, but when it comes to, that middle linebacker talent, um, there's a big drop off after this, and he gets you a guy
Yep.
that you can run in there. If Ernest Jones, God forbid, if he gets hurt, what do you do right now? You hide? I don't know. Now you have a guy you can come in and still run your defense, and so, um, yeah, I felt good about it, even though I don't think Seahawks fans are going to love that pick.
Yeah, I mean, devil's advocate here. There's definitely a trade off of choosing a guy like that and I don't know what your mock looked like. I know that my mock had him plus also Jack Besh and Jalen Royals still on the board.
Mm,
And that's the direction I ended up going. So I ended up getting wide receiver Jack Besh from
which I like.
TCU at
Yeah.
82. I just think if you take a look at uh, uh, roster building and roster need, what is going to give you the bigger impact? And you're still in the top 100, and you're talking about walking away from the draft with as much impact as possible in that range still. And that's where I personally, I tip the scales towards the wide receiver out of TCU. And
Hmm.
man, talk about a Seahawk. Like, he's just a Seahawk in
Yeah.
every way, shape, or form. And I really was excited that he was on the board there. And there's many times where he's not. He's off into the 60s and 70s, which I expect. In the draft, if you want him, you're going to have to move, because I don't think that he's going to be there at 82.
Yeah. In my
But great
draft, he went at
upside.
71.
Yeah. Okay. And
So,
that's it, right? That's kind of the range, I think. And
yeah.
maybe even earlier, just because of the intangible stuff that he brings to the table. Just a
Hmm.
warrior kind of guy, a guy that you want to go um into battle with, and he's got all the upside. He's a fighter. He kind of reminds me of Antoine Bolden a little bit as far as a possession style receiver, that's going to move chains for you and come up with big plays at big moments. And for your third wide receiver on the roster, I don't think you can ask for any more. And eventually, this guy earns a spot as probably your two.
Yeah.
Eventually,
So he is, because, Cooper Cup's going to get hurt, and he's your guy that can come in. And he does
yeah,
every year.
yeah,
He's not going to play 16 games. So at some point, he's not going to be available. And you've got his prototype sitting there ready to come in. Um, and if Cooper Cup is available, well, then guess what? You've got an upgrade over, um, God. Okay, now names are starting to fall off my head.
Bobo.
Bobo, yeah, Jake Bobo.
Yes,
In terms, again, similar style but better. And so,
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, the
Let's
guys
be
that I was.
realistic. There is love out there for Bobo. No question. He's a warrior guy, a guy you love to have on
Oh,
your
he works
roster.
hard.
Great
Yeah.
special teams guy. But he's got limited upside at the skill that you really want, which is getting open and catching the ball. Now he can catch just fine. It's the getting open part that he struggles with, and you got to scheme him open, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and anyway, you're right. I think it is an upgrade, and I was good with that pick.
Yeah.
Did you have 92 still?
Wait, I'm sorry, I was looking at who was available. When I made my previous pick, I had 92 as well.
Okay, so I traded off of that as part of moving up for 40. So
Um, and I picked a player here that I don't even know if we've talked about. Um, and I went tight end with Harold Fannin Jr. Out of Bowling Green, 6'3", 241. This is a guy who um, is he's practically a wide receiver. The way you can move him around, and he's a weapon in the passing game. And is he much of a blocker? No, not at all. But he is a guy who has really great route running for a guy his size. Um, you know, hard to tackle, had 34 broken tackles last year. Um, I mean, he did have 43% of his snaps be in line, but I still think you don't want him there. He's basically a Noah Fant um, replacement. If you are in this position where you're like, you know what, let's go ahead and someone's asking for Noah Fant, giving you decent value, you want to move off of him because of the cap space, whatever. This is your replacement. A guy that can come in and do great things as a pass catcher, and needs some work as a blocker.
so this is a guy that I always get hung up on athleticism and measurables, and don't give him enough credit for being just a good football player. Here's a guy that was, targeted like 181 times in college, had 2 drops.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a guy that's just constantly productive, and yet he's got a 4.71 40. He's shorter and not as long. He's 6'3", but he's also only got 32-inch arms. And you're going like, okay, so he's not quite as long as you want. He's not quite as fast as you want, and not as athletic as you want, but the production speaks for itself. And the tape doesn't lie. Now he's a little choppy, in his route running and his running style, but he's just so productive. You just can't dismiss that. And at the end of the day, it is about the tape. And
And
this player checks all the boxes.
his 40 time isn't great, but his 10-yard split is in the
His
90th
10-yard split is
percentile.
elite for his size.
And
Yes.
and then you look at his 3-cone, and you're at 83rd percentile. So
And
this is a
Seattle
guy
really
that,
pays attention to that.
yeah, this is a guy that, is he super athletic? No, but he's great. He moves in that with that short um, area quickness, like a guy who's half his weight. Um, and okay, half's probably exaggeration, but 60
Yeah,
pounds
20,
lighter. We'll go
25
with that.
pounds, 30 pounds
Um,
lighter anyway. Yeah.
and and so he moves it. He gets open, and then he's really sure-handed.
Yes,
So
very
again,
sure-handed. Yeah.
against a linebacker, um, they're not going to be able to cover him. They just aren't. They're not going to have the change of direction ability to cover him in that short area, and he's going to get open and he's going to catch the ball.
Yeah.
So
I think
uh,
he's a tremendous value at that spot. A lot of mocks will have him going in the 50s. And I think some of the sparkle has rubbed off him a little bit as this process has gone on. But at the beginning of the process, when it's just film and you don't do all the measurables and all that, so you're just watching film, and a lot of these draft rooms, that's the biggest thing that they rely on.
mhm.
And he's, a second round talent that you're getting, in the middle or back end of the third round. And I think that's a good value. Okay.
Cool. What do you have for next?
Well, as part of that 40 trade, I swapped picks essentially, 92 for 112,
Hmm.
which enabled me to kind of get in the middle of that that fourth round area that was missing. So we were at 92 and 137.
Yep. And then my next pick is 137.
And my next pick is 125 because I made a trade. But at 112, I kind of went best player available and a player I didn't want to leave the draft without. And that was quarterback Will Howard, Ohio State. I drafted a quarterback. I wasn't setting out to necessarily do that. I wasn't going to take one early based on our current quarterback room. I think the Seahawks have kind of moved off that idea as well. Jackson Dart, Sanders, if he should fall, all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably not in play. But a guy with the developmental upside could definitely be. He's a little older of a prospect, I think 23, 24. But I like his upside out of all the second, third tier quarterbacks available. Just from a leadership standpoint, all the intangibles, the way that he diagnoses a defense and goes through his reads, even though like 40% of his throws were first read throws, that's just because Ohio State is really freaking good. And his first read throws, the guy was open, and then their offensive line, all those things considered. Nonetheless, I like Will Howard. I like the upside. Will he be a perennial all-pro quarterback for you? Time will tell. Probably not. He's probably going to be a really solid backup in the NFL. And at this spot in the draft, a really solid backup is a decent value. And he could go win you a game. He won the national championship. And so I got to give him a little props for that.
No, I like him. I think early on I was kind of on his bandwagon as a third or fourth round pick to develop, and then I kind of have found other guys that are fun and that I want to highlight on this show. But ultimately, there's a reason why I started with him as my mid-round project, because I think he's a guy that has that potential. He is a guy that if you there are very few fourth round picks that turn into starters, but Kirk Cousins has had a really nice career as that, and he has that vibe. He just does, like a guy that he's not that sexy Shador Sanders pick that you want to take in the first round, but he's got the skills, he's got the talent, he's got the arm talent, that even though he's going to be taken later, that if he shows he's got the processing, he can handle it. Like he can do it. So
yeah, I see, potentially, in real world here, that he could go 30 picks earlier. Like, especially after that John Gruden thing. I just was like, okay, this guy's a real deal. Like he's the real deal. And kind of opened my eyes a little bit to him. Big board wise, he's on the consensus big board at 93. So,
and you got him at 112.
That
like that's a good work.
Okay. So
you have the next pick as well.
Yeah. So I had 137. I identified my player as the draft was unfolding, paused my draft at 125 and traded with the Chargers. They received pick 137, 175, and pick 223. I received 125 and pick 181. And I went and got Terrence Ferguson, the tight end from Oregon, with that pick. One of the last remaining tight ends, I thought, on my draft board. Do it all tight end. Gives you some pass catching opportunities. Also, inline blocker. Guy that's very productive over many seasons. Durable. Good athlete. All that kind of stuff. After that, I think the tier of tight ends kind of drops off a little bit, and there's a shelf there, and so wanted to get him and add to my tight end room, like you just did.
Yeah. No, I like the value of when moving up and getting him, because if you don't, you're not really getting much of a tight end in this draft.
Or you're getting a guy that does one thing really well.
Yeah.
A blocking guy or a guy that has upside as a receiver, but doesn't give you anything else.
In my draft, he went 129. Um, so yeah, from 137, you would have had to move up to go get him. Like he's just
Yeah.
not going to be available at 137. Um, so I like that trade. I like that pick. I really do. I stuck at
And
137.
go for it.
Um, and I finally went and got my nose tackle because I needed one and he was there. Um, and I went and picked up, whoa, come on, computer, stop bouncing around. Um, I picked up Jordan Phillips out of Maryland,
Hmm.
defensive tackle, little shorter at 6'2". Um, was at the combine at 312, but played at 322. Um, so he's not that 340-pound nose tackle, but man, this guy just wins with power.
Hmm.
Just overwhelms centers. You have to double team him because he'll overwhelm you at center. Um, and yeah, just is just super strong. Plays really smart with his hands and everything. And he's only 20. So
Hmm.
and his lateral agility for a 320-pound guy is really good. He's really powerful initial punch. Like there's a lot. He's undeveloped as a pass rusher. He's not a guy that's going to explode past your center and get straight to your quarterback.
Hmm.
Um, but he's going to overwhelm your center and push him back into your quarterback's face. Um, and so
Yeah,
I
I
like
don't
him. I
worry
think
about the
yeah.
agility shit with this guy. This guy, you put him in a phone booth and you leave him there, and he controls the booth,
Yeah.
and that's and he swallows double teams. He allows everyone else to do their jobs. This is the kind of player that Seattle does not have on their roster right now.
Mhm.
The Tyleek Williams, the Kenneth Grant, now this guy.
Mhm.
It's the same. We're trying to do the same thing, just with a different player. And you recognize the idea that this allows your defense to play as one unit together,
Mhm.
and it kind of is the glue piece in the middle there.
Yeah, Cameron Young was supposed to be that
Yeah,
when
yeah,
Seattle
right.
drafted him, and he's just never been healthy enough to show us that he can do the job. He's just never really gotten on the field and done anything.
Yeah.
And so at some point he needs to either do that or his time in the NFL is gonna disappear. And honestly, getting a guy like Phillips just
Yeah.
reduces your reliance on waiting for him to finally put it together. Because now you've got another guy who can step in and do it. So
Okay. I am at 172.
I am at I've got a couple picks before you pick.
Okay.
Um,
So go for it.
because in one of my trades, I ended up at 148. And with that, I went running back, which I know is going to probably make some people unhappy. But the guy that was sitting here, I really like. I like in Seattle's new scheme was an outside zone scheme, and that would be Devin Neal um, out of Kansas. He's 5'11", 213. You and I tend to like our running backs a little bigger than that, but um, he's got great acceleration, gets chunk plays, just changes direction with natural fluid motion, and his ability to make that cut, get up through the line on these outside zone runs. I think will just be it'll just be a nice perfect fit for Seattle because he changes speed really well and just can just jump through a hole when it materializes and is very patient as a runner. Um,
So answer me this.
mhm.
On his measurables, it shows he's got 4.58 speed. On tape, he looks faster. He's
He
certainly got
does.
the burst. He's got 115 career runs of over 10 plus yards. The guy can
Mhm.
obviously break away. And so what's going on there? Why the disconnect between the measurable and the film?
I don't know. I think it might be some people just don't Some people are better as a player than they are on the track. And I don't really have much of a better explanation than that. But 4.58 isn't fast. It's faster than like the Chris Carsons of the world, but certainly not an elite speed in any way. But his broad jump of 124 is extremely good. His vert of 37.5 inches is
Exactly.
extremely
I
good.
mean, his
Like,
burst is amazing, right? He can get through the hole.
yeah, like he's explosive. Um, his acceleration is great too. If you watch his tape, like he just puts his foot in the ground and is automatically at full speed. And so I like him. Um, and you watch the tape and he runs away from guys. So 4.58 doesn't make a lot of sense.
Hmm.
And I think he's faster than that shows. I
I
really
do
like
too.
him. I know that
I like him.
he's dropped considerably on big boards since the combine because of that 4.58
Yeah, right.
speed and the 1.58 10-yard split, which is right in the middle. It's really average. Um, and his short shuttle was bad. I think he was 4.53, which is like under 10th percentile. He just didn't test well, except for in the two jumping things. But his tape is really good. And at this point in the draft, I'm like, if you're gonna get a running back, you're not wasting a lot of draft capital, and you're
Mhm.
getting a guy that I think is gonna have a really nice career.
Okay, so what do you do next?
So after this was the point where I realized I don't have a wide receiver yet. I've done a lot of stuff that are nice picks, nice additions to Seattle's roster, but they don't fill one of the things I felt like they had to get out of this draft, and that's a deep threat, a guy that can stretch the field. Um, and so I actually did that on my next two picks. But the first one was Ty Felton out of
Hmm.
Maryland. And just a guy that, I mean, that's what he is. He's just straight line speed and the ability to stretch defenses and open things up underneath for you know JSN and Cooper Cup and that because they need someone who can take the top off the defense and the elite speed just shows up on his tape. Plus he's 6'2", which doesn't hurt. When
Hmm.
you've got that speed and you've got the height, it just makes it a lot harder for the cornerbacks to get to the football and break up the pass. So I just see him as having a tremendous, um, career. His yards per catch is going to be his average is going to be probably be over 20 yards. Even if he only has 30 receptions in the year, he's going to have a big impact um, on Seattle's offense if they end up with him because that's what they need. They just need it. They need the guy with the vertical speed.
So when I was in this range, so my next pick is 172. So in between where you picked and where I picked, um, I looked at him. I also looked at Torrey Horton
Hmm.
for the
So
same
did I.
sort of thing,
Yep.
right? The 6 foot six, Torrey Horton 6'3", 185, but he takes the top off. And
Hmm.
that was one thing I ended up coming out of my draft without.
Yep.
I had Jack Besh, but I didn't have a guy that could stretch that field. I think personally, your selection and what the Seahawks do on draft day is going to have a player that takes the top off the defense, a guy that does one thing really well, a guy like Torrey Horton or somebody similar, right?
I really like Torrey Horton. He was a guy I wanted. Um, and just it just didn't fall in a way that I could get him. I would have
Mm,
needed to take him instead of Devin Neal at 148. Um, but the running back talent I felt hit a shelf after that, and so I went ahead
yeah,
and took Neal, knowing that there were a couple of guys after Horton that I didn't like as much, but I knew would fit
yeah,
what I was trying to get, and that's the deep threat receiver.
yes. So, like Dante Thornton out of Tennessee.
Yeah.
is a later round guy that does one thing really well, and
Hmm.
that would be it. Okay, so at 172, I did my linebacker. So you did one earlier. I got mine at 172. Shmael Mondon Jr., the linebacker out of
Yeah.
Georgia. Now I had
Hmm.
Jalen Walker, his teammate, at number one. Right, those two kind of man the middle in that Georgia defense, and did really well. I like him. Similar skill set than Walker, as far as the will linebacker skill set. So a guy that can drop back into coverage, a guy that's super quick, athletic, slightly undersized, probably is going to play that will and only be that. He's not going to be a guy that you're going to want to take over for Ernest Jones, I don't think. And at this level of the draft, I'm looking for a rotation guy. I'm looking for a Tyrese Knight substitute guy, a guy that can come in and give him some spot relief and so forth. A guy that can play special teams, maybe some upside there, where he could be a guy that could start. He's really valued on the big board and overall in the linebacker group. I just think that he's got some things to work on, and he's got some time, and he's got a great linebacker coach and a great defensive minded coach that is going to put him in the best position to be successful. So it's a good landing spot for him, I think.
So you're gonna love this. In my draft, he went 143.
Wow.
He went a full round before you got him. Um,
Interesting.
that is incredible value for you to get him where you did. Like that's crazy value. I
Yeah,
like
I thought
him.
so. I've seen him go
I
earlier than that. In
I
fact,
really
I've
like
taken him
him. I
earlier
don't
than that in mocks I've done.
I really like him. I just didn't in this draft it's just the way that it fell. He wasn't in play for me because I already got a middle linebacker. But I would have considered him at 148 um very strongly if didn't have another player. But then he wouldn't
Yeah.
have been there because he went 143. So for you to get him at 172
Yeah, he's just
is
super
that's a
athletic.
great
Like I
yeah.
don't know, man. I think you can scheme him around and move him around a little bit. He's 6'2", but he's only 229. I think you can get him up to 235. Not much of a frame there to work with. Mediocre 40 at 4.58, but 1.52 split, which shows he's got
Hmm.
tremendous burst. Um, Led the team in tackles there at Georgia. I think just an exceptional athlete. You just bring him in, you work him into the rotation, you kind of figure it all out, a little bit of durability issues and so forth. That's why he's at, this level of the draft. You mentioned 149. I think that's the range, 150 to 175 is probably where that guy's going to go.
Yeah.
So I was at 181, I
I
believe. Yeah,
have
181.
170. I have 172 still. So
Okay.
I said that because after not getting a deep threat, I doubled up and two picks in a row. And so I went Ty Felton at 159, and at 172 I went Jalen Lane out of
Okay.
Virginia Tech. He's a little faster at 4.34,
Yeah. Yeah.
but a little shorter at 5'11. But what really sold me on drafting him is uh he is a legit beast as a kick returner and a
Yeah.
punt returner. He gets upfield very fast, makes people miss, and is a threat to take the ball and hit that home run for you. Um, a fast, explosive athlete. Just you look at his
Yeah.
40 and his three cone and all that kind of stuff. Just everything's there. His route tree is kind of one dimensional. He runs really fast in a straight line. He can take a top
So
off the defense if
he
you have
clears
to.
out the space for underneath guys.
Yeah. He is a guy that you have to he's either going to take the top off the defense and keep the free safety back to create space, or you have to scheme him the ball, whether it be on those jet sweeps or on a wide receiver screen. Something you have to because his route tree is very underdeveloped. He's just a speed demon in a football uniform, and honestly, but his ability as a kick and punt returner, which they freaking need, they
Yeah.
need a guy that can do that, and the fact that he um, can masquerade as a deep threat wide receiver, um, helps. But his kick and punt returner is going to get him on the roster, and then he's going to develop a broader route tree that's going to turn him into a good wide receiver. And so it was even though it was a double up as far as like the position and everything, it was not a difficult decision to take him.
Interesting. So I'm at 181. Where are you at?
I'm at 175.
Okay.
I've got another one. I didn't realize that it was that quick.
You've got a lot of picks.
I have a lot of picks. I gained 2 picks with my first trade, and I did not give up any picks when I traded up. I just moved around a little bit. And I went safety at 175 with Jalen Reed out of Penn State, a guy that I know you like. Just
I
is
like his counterpart a little better, but you got to get him earlier in the draft for sure.
Yeah. This guy
Kevin Winston
plays. Jalen Reed plays physical. He likes to hit people, and just is a kind of a tone setter in there. Not the biggest guy for that style at 6 foot 211, but is versatile. You can move him around. You can play him at different spots. His 4.49 40 is not going to tell you that he's going to be a single high safety.
Yeah, but he's got a 10-yard split. That's 151, which is not bad at all.
Which is elite. Yeah. So he's explosive. He likes to hit people. He's a good tackler, and you can move him around and do a lot of different things with him. And he's going to play a lot of special teams at the next level. And at this point in the draft, I felt like it was a good pick, and it kind of felt the need of safety depth. So,
yeah, it's the Mike McDonald kind of pick. Your tone setter guy, a guy's going to come in and be physical and just kind of add to that part of the defense, which I think needs a little adding to. And so that's a great pick. All right, so 181, I went running back. So this is where I got my running back. You got Devin Hill earlier. I chose running back Raheem Sanders.
I like
out
him.
of South Carolina.
Yeah.
I do like him too. It's just one of those deals. Again, you mentioned it. We kind of like these bigger backs, and here's the guy, 6 foot, 228 pounds, but runs a 4.46 40 with a 1.55 split, 36-inch vertical, shows the burst. Very productive guy, team captain on his roster. His nickname is Rocket. He's he's just a really decent value in this range, I think. He's a guy that runs that wide zone stuff, one cut and go guy. Can be a downhill guy in between the tackles when you need him to, but can also stretch that out and pick his lanes and go. And also gives you some receiving out of the backfield capability. So, I think he's going to end up being, the third or fourth running back in your room for now. And you see what you got, and maybe earns more reps. And eventually, I think this guy could be a number 2 for somebody, whether it's Seattle or somebody else.
Yeah. I like that. I like that player. I like that pick. He's a guy I kind of try and keep an eye on and see if it's going to fall. And in a way that I can get him on my roster when I do these mocks, because I think where he goes in the draft and the quality of football player that you get are not aligned. I think he's a much better player than you're getting.
This running back class is legit. Keith.
It is. It's a good one. And I like him over a bunch of guys that go in front of him.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes when you're doing these mocks, you kind of forget. You almost have to check, the running back, just the running back folder to find out who's the best available, or the tight ends or the wide receivers, because you kind of forget where these guys are going. You choose somebody else because, well, I need to fill this kind of spot, and this is a good value for me. And you're looking at the 10 picks before and after kind of your range, And sometimes you miss out on a guy like this because he is going later. He is on the big boards later. And, I don't think he's as one dimensional as he gets pegged as. Which is a big physical guy that's, he's got some speed to him. He's got some agility. He diagnoses his running lanes really well, and he's got that burst. So, and the receiving out of the backfield, I think you're right. I think he's kind of a guy that could go in the 120 range and nobody would bat an eye.
Well, I think plenty of people would bat an eye because they don't think running backs should ever be taken. Even the best ones before that. But yeah, I
Okay.
just I think he's undervalued. My next pick isn't until the 223.
Okay. Well, you're before me.
Oh, okay.
How many more picks do you have?
I have 2 more.
Okay. I have 234, my last pick.
Yeah, I have 223 and 234. At 223, I doubled up at tight end with Luke Lackey out of Iowa. This was more of a best player available kind of situation. I didn't need another tight end. I already got my my Noah Fant replacement up above. They've already got Barner on the roster, but Lackey gives me a guy that I just like. I like his game. I think that overall he's a guy that he just does a lot of things well. At 6'6", 251, he's got size that you want at the position in order to line up in line and do some things. 4.77 is not going to impress a lot of people.
Will
3
Disley had a
cone.
4.75 or whatever.
Yeah. 7.18's not going, 3 cones not going to impress a lot of people. But he blocks really well. He does that, but he also has a great feel for zone coverages, a good catch radius, and his ability to get up and catch balls that are not thrown well and away from his body. And I mean, the one thing that people would are going to be concerned is he had an ankle injury in 2023 that affected him through 2024. And so he's a guy that, is going to drop because people are going to be concerned. Hey, is that ankle ever going to be healthy? Is he ever going to live up to his athletic potential? But I think at this point in the draft, he's absolutely worth it. We're talking 7th round pick. Why would you not take a shot on a guy that has way more talent than the people who are also available at the spot?
I agree. I think you take him much earlier if he comes out in 2023. I think that, he's the coach's best friend on a roster. This is a guy that's an academic, all-American kind of a guy, Dean's List, very coachable, team captain, as far as the character quality of the human, and a little older prospect, almost 24, will be 24 at the in training camp. But you're getting a mature player, a guy that really does it all on the field, does a little of everything really good, but nothing really great, kind of a player, and very coachable, teachable. I think he would be a great scheme fit in Seattle because Seattle uses multiple tight ends all the time, and a guy that's reliable, that is going to show up for you and add to your locker room. As far as just the level of character is a good pick at this spot.
Yeah,
all right. Do you want me to go with my?
Crazy.
Do you want me to go with my 234?
Yeah, go with your 234.
Okay, so you doubled down early with offensive line, and I took a flyer on an offensive lineman at the end, and I chose Jack Nelson, which I've talked about from Wisconsin before. So offensive tackle in college. I think, though, that he potentially is going to align better as a right guard in the NFL. 6'7", my goodness sakes. 314, 33.5-inch arms. He has a little bit of a struggle with power and edge rushers, speed rushers on the edge. And I think that's why he ends up moving inside. Started all 12 games at left tackle, 13 games at left tackle in 2023 and 2024. So But good agility, good ability to get to the second level. I think the upside is there, especially in this program. You're getting what you get, and durable, 4-year starter with some upside there that needs a little bit of maybe play strength work and agility footwork, but you're getting a guy that could potentially be a swing tackle or an interior guard prospect in a long term that may end up finding a role. Now it's 7th round, you're looking for a flyer, you're probably going to end up being a career backup, but it really depends on your roster and his development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that. It's Wisconsin, right? If you get a chance to start at Wisconsin as an offensive lineman, and especially for as much as he has, you must be doing something well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
those guys train their offensive linemen well, and they have really, really high standards.
And as a
Um,
freshman, he
for
did come in and he did start 13
Yeah,
games at right guard as a freshman.
yeah.
So he does have some
Um,
experience there in the interior.
and I just like, yeah, I don't think he's a tackle, and he played pretty much exclusively tackle after his freshman year, and that's pushing him down a little bit. He's not the greatest athlete, blah blah blah. Um,
He's not a bad athlete.
but
He's just yeah.
you don't start at Wisconsin at tackle for that many games and not be good and not be coachable and not
Mm-hmm.
like they're they are now what Stanford was a decade ago as far as like offensive line gurus coaching, talent. Um, and anytime you get a chance in the 7th round to get a guy like that, I think you do it.
Agreed.
You just have to. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't. Um,
So what was your last flyer on a player?
my last flyer on a player actually doubled up at nose tackle. And it had more to do with the fact that we were down at 234, and I was just looking for someone I liked because a lot of the guys I like were already gone. And I didn't want to do nose tackle again, but I finally did. Cam Jackson out of Florida. Um,
Yeah.
at the combine, he was 6'6", 328, but his playing weight was 342. This guy is pure power muscle, um, impossible to move, nose tackle, who has considerable conditioning concerns. If you watch his tape from college, he's a rotational nose tackle that let him play a few snaps and then he comes out. And then he comes back in for a few snaps and goes back. You know what I mean? Like he's not. They need he needs some time with an NFL training staff to, or strength and conditioning coach to get his endurance to where it needs to be so that he can be a regular contributor. But we're talking near the end of the 7th round of the draft, and
Right.
the guy can dominate at times. Just not for very long until you have to pull him and bring him back in later. So, but I just
I
think
like the pick. Yeah.
I like the potential.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's a guy that's not going to give you anything agility wise. He's got a 24-inch vertical, which I
Yeah.
mean, and a 93-inch broad jump or centimeter broad jump, which is a 2 percentile. But he's
Mm-hmm.
got that almost 84-inch wingspan at 6'6" and 328. You're just gonna you're gonna give him a year in your offseason program to get stronger, to learn a position, find out what the coaches want from you, all that kind of stuff. And if he checks all the boxes, he's definitely a guy right at the back end of that round that is potentially available.
Mm-hmm.
So you got Jordan Phillips, is that right? And then now this Cam
Yeah.
Jackson.
So Jordan Phillips would come in as your assumed starter at nose, or at least a rotational guy if you're going to start Reed at nose, and
Right,
then
right,
but Phillips is
right.
going to be a run stuffer, nose tackle.
Yeah.
And Cam Jackson's a developmental guy. Maybe he spends the first year on the practice squad.
No, I
Unless
like the
there's an
fact that
injury or that. So
you've got a couple of 330-pound dudes, like
yeah,
which our roster just does not have, right? And so you just
yeah.
bring another one in,
Yep.
Undrafted rookie free agent, bring in another guy. Yeah, it's just I think it's undervalued in this defensive scheme, and I don't think
Hmm.
Seattle's fully recognized that yet until maybe this
Well,
year.
I think that McDonald does. I mean, you look at who he had
It's true. McDonald
in
had three
Baltimore.
guys on that roster over 320 pounds.
Yeah. And so he had guys like they made a point of going out and getting nose tackle type guys that could just clog that middle and make running up the middle and short yardage really, really hard. Um, and so I think that, the Seahawks didn't have, well, they had one, but he wasn't healthy. And then they had another one that they brought in as a vet that just is on the downside of his career and just wasn't that effective. Um, and so now they're looking to figure out how do we get how do we create some depth at that spot, get some talent at that spot because they need it.
So, wrapping this thing up and recapping your draft, Keith, give me a couple things that you really like about the draft and one thing that you wish turned out a little different.
Well, I liked the fact that I went with a lot of guys in the trenches. The two offensive linemen in the middle, two defensive linemen, two offensive linemen at the top, a defensive lineman in the middle, and at the end. Um, a lot of defense, linebacker, cornerback in there. I did get my speed wide receiver. As they're not as polished as the guys that I would have rather had, but I'm not looking for a polished guy. If I'm being completely honest, I'm looking for a guy that can take the top off the defense because I've got JSN and Cooper Cup,
Yeah.
um, and Scantling,
Yes.
Valdez Scantling in there too. So I've got those guys. I like the way that it turned out. That I spent my draft capital where I think it needs to be spent, in the trenches, on defense. And I didn't go do a quarterback, which normally I do in this draft. But
How
honestly,
many
the quarterback
starters do you go ahead?
I say honestly, I think um, the quarterback class is pretty poor. So
Mhm.
as far as how many starters, I'm looking. I got
Yeah, if you looked at
three,
your
four,
existing roster, who
five.
are the guys that you're drafting and who are they replacing on your roster?
So Banks is a starter at guard. Pick one. I don't even care. The
Hmm.
guards on the roster aren't good enough to worry about. Um, Zabel's gonna replace Oluwatimi. I think that's an upgrade. Um, Morrison's gonna come in and possibly be your number two. Um,
Hmm.
Cornerback at worst going to be your number three. So he's
Hmm.
taking Josh Job snaps. I think that's an upgrade. Or he makes Woolen expendable and takes over that job. Again, that's an upgrade. Knight is one of those picks that doesn't really have a spot. I like him, but he's not a starter in year one because there's two guys already there.
Yes.
Fannin Jr., I think, is a starter or at least a major contributor. Depends on how you want to view starters at tight end because it just depends on what
The
plays you're
alignment, all that
calling.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Phillips, I think, is if he's not a starter right away, he will be one because they don't have another real nose tackle. And I think Devin Neal has that potential at running back. Um, and then you've got your um, probably your fourth wide receiver in Lane and your fifth or sixth in Reed, but Reed's also your starting kick returner. So I've got guys that I think make an impact on the roster, even though I've probably only got three day one starters out of this draft out of 12.
The depth, though, I mean, wow. Nice. I mean, that's the promise of this draft. I guarantee
Mm-hmm.
you, Seattle's going to come away with probably 6 or 7 guys that are going to impact the roster in year one, whether that's start or heavy rotation minutes.
Yeah.
Um,
So do the same exercise on yours. Like, how do you feel overall, and how many starters do you have in it? That kind of thing.
so at 18, Jalen Walker, the edge from Georgia, I don't know. I mean, I'm when I made the selection right after I made it, I'm like, I don't know if I would do that again, if I would push select again. I liked
He's such a
it.
good player, though.
He's a good player, and I don't know why I'm having such a reservation about it, but um,
Because of
yeah,
Mafe, Hall,
I just haven't considered
um,
him as much.
N-
And yeah, it's a
Nuwasu,
loaded
and
room and Dexter
Lawrence.
Lawrence.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now you got Jalen Walker. Like something's got to give. I love the Gray Zabel pick, the moving up at 40. I think that's it's kind of a no brainer. It's either going to be Gray Zabel or it's going to be Donovan Jackson or it's going to be Banks or it's going to be Will Campbell if he falls and they go move up and get him. It's going to be somebody. They're Tate
Yeah.
Ratledge. They're going to get somebody. I like the defensive tackle high enough to where he's an impact starter right away. Like there's no question that he's going to come in and affect the roster. Tyreek Williams, Jack Betch, one of my favorite players in the draft. I think immediately comes in and and is your number 3, number 4, and just adds to that room and eventually just becomes a really solid like 10-year guy for you. And then Will Howard, you're just taking a flyer. I like him as good as any tier 2 quarterback in this draft. And so you just kind of take a shot. And if you miss, you miss. You spent 112th overall pick on it. Terrence Ferguson, I really like at tight end. I'm glad I moved up and got him. Shmuel Mondon is one of those players that
Hmm.
you don't exactly know where he's going to fit in right now, but eventually he's such a good athlete and a good player. Mike McDonald and company will figure it out. Raheem Sanders could be a value of the draft type of pick at
Yeah.
181. Could end
God,
up
that's
being on the roster for a while. He could
such a
take over
good
for Zach
value.
Charbonnet at some point
Yeah.
if you decide to move on from Charbonnet. I don't know why you would. I like Charbonnet, but maybe down the road Charbonnet's hard to resign, or they decide to hang on to Ken Walker because Ken Walker becomes affordable and Charbonnet's the guy that moves on, and you still have Raheem Sanders. And Jack
Hmm.
Nelson's just a flyer on a player that 7th round has some upside. Probably makes the roster just because you don't have a lot else there. You've got Gerald and Josh Jones. I think he pushes Josh Jones for that roster spot. So I like it. I think I added about as many players that will impact the roster year one as you did, which and this happens with every mock. I think it probably for you too is you realize you come away with a pretty good strong selection of players. It's not just the top 5. It's probably 6 or 7 deep out of your
Hmm.
draft that are really going to come in and make the roster and make your team better, and long term really gives you an opportunity to really kind of solidify the depth of the roster.
Hmm.
Maybe not just at the top. You've got 2 or 3 guys obviously that are coming and start, but the rest of the picks really solidify the depth, which I think we could work on. I mean, you take a look at our offensive line depth; it's not good.
It's bad. Yeah. Well,
Right,
the offensive line talent is bad too. So it's bad at the top and bad at the bottom on the
right.
line. So
And
I think the
defensive
Seahawks.
tackles, another position you doubled down on that.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. So it's good.
I look at all of this, and a lot of it has to do with the 5 picks in the top 100. Yeah, um you get guys that are impact players when you're picking in the top 100. But the other thing is that because you got 5 of them, right? Like I was able to go
Me too.
take a guy like Demetrius Knight that I probably would have skipped in another draft simply because they don't really need a starting linebacker, so I could wait and take one later. But he was so good that I went ahead and took him anyway because I felt like I could. I'd already gotten 3 starters before I picked him, and also you fill in a bunch of needs at the top. You're at the in the middle rounds. You're like, okay, well, who's really good? Not who fits a need. Who do I whatever. It's like find me the best player, just the best guy that's going to come in and just make everybody better. And that's where you get a guy like Jordan Phillips. That maybe if I'd had to go defensive line early in order to get a nose tackle, I skip over a guy like that. But I didn't have to. I was able to get other guys and fill a bunch of needs. So I'm able to go and just pick and choose. It's just the flexibility that the Seahawks have in this draft makes coming away with a great draft haul
Yeah.
really easy.
You and I did it two different ways using the flexibility. I moved around to the point where I left the draft with 9 players. I moved up to 40. So did you, 39. I moved up again for, at 125 off of 137. That left me the draft, with a few less players. And
Yeah, I ended up
I'm
with 12.
okay. Yeah, which is crazy. I don't know if they leave the draft with 12 because I don't think that there's 12 spots. Like the roster is deficient in some spots, but are all 12 players on your draft board going to make the roster?
I would say
That would,
11 of them do.
yeah, that would be my only little concern about overdrafting a
Well,
lot of players.
maybe 10. I don't. Jalen Reed has work to do to make the roster. I think he can as a special teams player. Um, Luke Lackey is a guy you think like 223 probably won't, but then you look at what Seattle has at tight end and you go, well, he's probably your third best tight end. So
Yeah.
maybe, and then Cam Jackson's probably on the practice squad. So those guys, everyone else, like there's a role for them.
Yeah.
Even Jalen Lane, my second wide receiver in this draft, because he's the kick and punt returner.
Right.
Like he gets the job as the
What
number
would you
5 receiver.
What
And
would you
it's
prefer?
interesting.
Would you prefer to come away with 12 or would you prefer to come away with 9 or 8 if it really meant that you were selectively targeting players and you went and got them?
I um in the draft, what the statistics bear out as far as the um who becomes a draft bust, who makes it, who doesn't. I prefer
More
shotgun
is better.
approach. More is
More is
better.
better. More is
Because
better.
ultimately you can do your evaluation and do it great, and then somebody gets hurt and they never have the NFL career that you expected them to. Um, and so more is better. And the thing is that like the likelihood that the 18th overall pick is um, has a legit career is high, but it's not 100%.
Yeah,
The
that's my fear
likely
with my pick, Jalen Walker. I think he's a boomer bust guy.
the likelihood that you're going to get a legit like long-term 10-year player when you take the what was it? It was the 23rd. Just kind of look at what I got back. Um, 23, 87, and 159. Because they're even though 87 and 159, your probability for each of those is lower than 18, like way lower. The combined probability of those 3 picks is better than your probability of just the one pick at 18. And
Mm-hmm.
so if your goal is to get one good long-term 10-year starter, more is better. And yeah, the shotgun approach is how I approach the draft. It's how John Snyder approached the draft for years in Seattle when he was
Yeah.
building championship caliber roster. Uh and then they started trading away their top picks for vets that didn't contribute much,
Right.
and things fell apart. And now you got to stop doing that. You got to go back to um having draft picks, having lots of draft picks, um, and bringing in young, cheap talent as much as possible.
All right. So we're out of here for today. We'll come back prior to the draft and we'll do a preview show. And then we've got a couple appearances a couple appearances on some draft shows or podcasts during the draft and right after the draft to kind of figure it out. We'll have our own after the draft as well, and to kind of wrap this thing up and talk about our selections, which will be amazing. So you can find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You can find the show at Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. You know the rest. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.